Hi everyone, this video will walk you through the 3-1-1 short answer assignment for explicit and implicit biases. So as you can see from the directions, you'll complete the following short answer questions. 1 to 2 sentences for each question. Provide an example of an implicit and an explicit bias. The examples may be from your own life, from something you have observed, or from the resources reviewed in this learning block. So for this first portion of the assignment, you are going to provide 1 or 2 sentences that give an example of implicit bias and an example of explicit bias. You have to discuss both, and please let me know which is which so that I can determine if you understand implicit and explicit bias. So if you have an example of implicit bias, say an example of implicit bias is, and give the example. The purpose of this is so that I can see that you understand the difference. So it's important that you do label them, and please do remember to discuss implicit and explicit and not just one or the other. And again, 1 or 2 sentences. This doesn't need to be very long. And then the second half of this assignment, why is it important to understand these biases? How can these biases influence human behavior? So for this, you need to explain, and again, it only has to be a couple sentences, why understanding bias is important and how biases can change how we behave and act as human beings. So taking a look at the rubric that you're provided, and I'll zoom it in a little so you can see it a little better. If you provide a short answer related to the prompts and it's actually, you answer both questions, then you will receive the full points here. If you identify the bias, if you provide an example of both implicit and explicit bias and they're labeled correctly and all of that, then you get this whole section. Communicates clearly, you will receive full points here. Where you will lose points is if, for example, it's not really related to the prompt. If you don't discuss biases at all, or you don't discuss human behavior at all, or you just say it just influences human behavior and don't explain the why part and the how part that it's asking for. If you don't provide both examples of implicit and explicit bias, you will lose points. Or if you have them inaccurate, if you have them reversed, you will also lose points. And of course, that communicates clearly. If what you've written can't be understood, you'll lose points for that as well. So it's not a very difficult assignment. You're going to take just a couple sentences, provide examples of implicit and explicit bias, and explain why it's important to understand the biases and how biases can influence human behavior. So you're going to give a why and a how, as well as one example of implicit and one example of explicit bias. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm looking forward to seeing your assignments.